A very warm welcome, everyone, for yet another Friday lecture by Team NIAS CSP. So, introducing today's speaker, Dr. Shalini Dixit. She is presently a faculty at the program of education program under Social Science School of National Institute of Advanced Studies. She holds an MPhil and a PhD from Zakir Hussain Center of Education Studies, JNU, and also a master's in psychology. She received NCERT doctoral fellowship for her PhD research, and also her doctoral work received the D. Sinha Best Doctoral Dissertation Award by the National Academy of Psychology in the year 2013. And she has a lot of experience in teaching and research in a number of colleges from DU, like Jesus and Mary's, Mata Sundari College, and Kamla Nehru, to name a few. So I'll request you, ma'am, to please begin your lecture. And thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be a speaker for today's lecture. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Niharika. Thank you, NIAS Consciousness Studies Program and Professor for having me here today. And today, I've been observing the diversity of the lectures that we have had on this series of NIAS lecture. I was wondering how I can do justice to the breadth and depth of the issues that has been covered. Yes, but I'll give it my try. What I'm going to do is I'll talk about inner journey, of course, but inner journey with specific context to a teacher and her interactions, her negotiations in the teaching learning process. So, in doing this, I will heavily draw from these voices are constantly. Is there a way we can stop these voices,
Yes,
Niharika?
I'll just do.
So I'll heavily draw from my experiences of teaching in a teacher education college and using specifically using Roger's approach to interpersonal relationships. More than sharing my own perspective, I would love to listen and be heard from all of you. So I really look forward to some stimulating discussions during and after the talk. Okay, so most of the basics that we all know about the teaching and learning is that the quality of our educational experiences largely has dwelled upon the kind what the teachers have made us feel, right? So if we remember a subject fondly, it's always because of the teacher who made you feel better. So even if somebody likes math, which is very unusual, even if somebody likes math, I hope Nitin is not here. So even then, there is some reason behind it, and the reasons largely are to be found in a teacher who's probably at school or at home in form of parents. But the way teachers makes us feel is determinantal in the way we experience the subject that we are negotiating with. Um, however, uh, it's simply said than actually done. When I'm saying that a teacher has to make us feel better about the subject and about ourselves, um, it's a huge it's a huge expectation and demand from the teacher, and it's that side that I'm going to talk about today. It's a demand. It doesn't come across as complicated as uh, probably I'll make it today. But you imagine the place of a teacher where she has to deal with people all the time, right, and people, we have heard in the common discourse and communication saying that teaching is a easy job. You're a female, you can take up teaching, you can just come back home and have spend half of the day. But if we really look at the life of a teacher, she begins her day quite early, of course, having done all the course that she's supposed to perform, she or he. Then, when she enters the school, the first thing she has to deal either with the admin or the students. In all these interactions, what she has to do is she has to put up, a face, and she's always delivering something. She's not a back-end worker. She's not a, although she is that also, but primarily she has to deliver, be it knowledge, be it values, be it skills. But she has to deliver things, and these are the things which are, sometimes knowledge and sometimes value system. Research has shown us that knowledge is not free from value system, the values that teachers are bringing in. I want to add one more thing: knowledge is not free from our emotional experiences. The way we relate to a knowledge is dependent upon how how that knowledge makes us feel. Does that knowledge liberates us or it burdens us? In the context of students, I just described in the beginning of the talk that if a teacher makes you feel better, you feel better. In the context of other people, you know have you read some of those theories which make you feel heavier, that if this is the reality, is it ever going to change? Some of those deterministic theories which say that this is the fixed human nature. And then on the other hand, you read something very, something like Rogers, or something like very humanistic phenomenological approach, and you feel so relaxed that yes, this makes us feel better. So knowledge, dealing with knowledge and transaction with knowledge is not value free, is not emotions free. And that is why when we are preparing teachers, when we are putting all these expectations from the teachers, we also need to consider that the back end work that a teacher does, or the experiences that a teacher is going through while transacting that knowledge. So in short, what I'm trying to tell you is that teacher is not just a role or not just a job. It's a psychosocial entity, and that psychosocial entity requires constant uh, engagement with the other psychosocial entities, like students, like colleagues. And these interactions make one psychosocial entity much more complex entity when it is interacting with the surrounding entities. So it's on this aspect that I uh, want to focus and want to bring to your notice that the self of a teacher in all this context is the important reference point for all these psychological executions, psychological maneuvering. Um, and we all know that our self is not just a constant or a final product. It's a dynamic entity which keeps evolving, which has a historicity to it, which is embedded in culture, languages that we use for ourselves and for others. So it's again embedded in a broader network. Now, goes without saying that if a teacher has to deliver all the expectations from her, she needs to have this critical self awareness, uh, because suppose she goes to she had a bad morning and she goes, and it's very simple and surface level of example. She had a bad morning and she goes to a class. She finds that one child has not done homework, and he's a child who always does not come with his homework done, right? So very normal case that a child who is non-performing, a teacher who has had a bad morning, and she goes and she then finds that once again this child has not done well. In her anger or in her frustration, she will flank the child, and she can use the words that she probably could not speak in the morning, and then she will you know uh, use all those uh, probably destructive languages and things which may influence a child in long term. So although it was a small incidence, but there is enough number of research to tell us that that this kind of labeling and negative feedback has negatively determinantal effect on children's well-being, also the students' well-being. So therefore, for a teacher to do her job well, she needs this awareness. She needs to somehow separate her distress, her challenges, her struggles from her job, which probably most of the teacher also try to do. But if it was so easy, then I would not be talking to you about this today. It's very simply said than done. Uh, And because it is complicated, because it is so challenging, uh, the teachers, even if they realize it, they sometimes they sometimes fail to address it, probably because sometimes our system doesn't allow them to voice those personal struggles. Sometimes there is no space in the system. If you look at the Indian education system, teachers are burdened with so many administrative tasks and so many operational work, and her performance is measured mostly in terms of the children's scores rather than children's happiness. Then even the system actually um, shrinks their scope of expressing their discomfort or their spaces where they could explore themselves. A teacher who has to now, so what is the solution to this? How do we go about it? The solution is only to have a teacher work on her self awareness. Self awareness is not just crucial for growth, but it's also helpful in addressing the intra and interpersonal conflicts. Interpersonal conflicts of the teacher, interpersonal conflicts of the students. It also helps in generating a psychological environment where one accepts differences in perspective and is open to possibilities. Suppose a teacher is in a class where the class is already, there is a lot of differences within the class. It could be a class of adolescent students. There, if a teacher wants to exercise her openness, we may feel that it could go against her. But I'll describe in a short while that how it's even more good and important that a teacher remains open and works on herself in such complicated situations. It's also important because a person who is having openness naturally extends openness to others. By doing so, a teacher creates a humanistic environment. Uh, but how do we create this environment? Before a person can create an environment, the person has to. I've just put a quote from Agne. It says that before a person can be caring, he must be able to perceive others and their behavior in such a way that affords compassion within him. Through realization of his own fear structures, he can be patient, defer judgments, and feel compassion for others, knowing they too struggle with fears. So, uh, a teacher not just has to work on herself, she has to work on her surroundings. And the excess of all this working on herself and surrounding again goes back to the teacher's work on herself. The solutions to this situation has been provided by several people. Um, uh, the extent to which a teacher can generate this feeling, Roder and Rager Roth has called this presence. Presence means awareness and availability. John Dewey has called it aliveness, and Sigzit Mihaly calls it flow. Carl Rogers calls it openness. So out of all this, I will take forward Rogers' framework, and I'll show how it has happened in the um, experiences that I have had. Rogers said that the problem in teaching, learning, and teachers' job actually comes with this word teaching. He says teaching is an overrated job. And why he says so? That he says that when we use the word teaching, it automatically uh, evokes questions like what to teach, how to teach, and till what age to teach. So several questions about teaching. It also assumes that teaching is a teacher and the person who's providing the teaching material knows better than the students. It also assumes that the world is a fixed reality, and whatever I teach my students today will be relevant for tomorrow. And because of all these, uh, Rogers had discomfort with teaching as a job, and therefore, instead of teaching, he wants to use the word facilitation of learning. When we implement this approach, there is a difference between teaching and facilitation of learning. How? In facilitation of learning, students initiate the work, and students are the one who take the responsibility and take the learning forward rather than the teachers. Now, why am I talking about all this when I was talking to you about a teacher's work on herself? Because when I say that teacher has to work on herself, there also has to be some agreement that it what kind of work am I talking about when I'm talking about the work of a teacher? So I'm talking about this kind of a work. I'm talking about facilitation of learning rather than actually teaching or instructing. So when the goal of a teacher is to create self-initiated, significant and deep learners, then what should be the way of the teacher? The way of the teacher uh, can can remain facilitation of learning. And to understand this entire assumption that what is the why Rogers is talking about facilitation of learning and what are the attitudinal qualities that he prefers, I just want to give a brief of what Rogers assumes about human behavior and the goal of a right fostering. What should be the goal of a human being, a human life? Rogers believed that people are either inherently good or neutral. Uh, he believed that people become destructive only when there is a poor self concept which develops as a result of negative externalities. And for a person to overcome all these social influences, which are generally negative, he uses the word fully functioning person. And he says that a fully functional person must be in a state of congruence, congruence with his real self, congruence with his imagined self, congruence with what ideal self is he matches. So actually Rogers differentiates between the real self and ideal self. For those of you who already know Rogers, I'll be brief that there is a ideal self which a person desires as a result of socialization, religious exposure, and it's similar to the um, mm, superego of a Freudian approach, that the person has an ideal. On the other hand, the real self is what the person really is. A poor surrounding or a poor exposure or a poor feedback or that kind of an angry teacher can widen the gap between real and ideal self, which is not a good state to be in. Then Rogers says that since we have a need for positive self regard, and this need is because we want to grow into a fully functioning person, we as human beings want to utilize our full potential. And since we are all either neutral or good, uh, we need to be treated like one. And he says that instead of giving a conditional positive regard, which is we give value to people based on their worth, their performance, their attitude towards you, he says that we should be giving unconditional positive regard. He says that we like and accept those parts of ourselves which other also like. So therefore it's important that we receive that unconditional self acceptance. When we receive, we are also prepared to give the same back to others. For a teacher to generate these qualities in students and in herself, there are three main characteristics that Rogers talks about. One is realness. Realness means, and these are also coming from Rogers' description of a fully functioning person. Who is a fully functioning person? Who is like an ideal person, of who an ideal person who has taken and received all these unconditional positive regard, and has no incongruence, and has, resolved his conflicts and the mismatches. He says that the person who is real is open to data each moment. Data means not the statistical data. The data means the knowledge about ourselves. For example, I am sitting in NIAS main faculty block, room number so and so. The temperature is so and so. My inner feelings are so and so. Am I feeling a little thirsty, or like feeling like having a tea? Further going down, data of me feeling apprehensive about the audience, I can't see their faces. So all this is my data about myself. That's my realness. And this realness, when I have this realness, I am able to um, communicate this realness to the other person who is in front of me. So if I can see Hari Krishnan, I can see and I can talk to him in his real sense. I can see Niharika, I can tell that this is instead of evaluating Niharika's appearance on the basis of what I think should a coordinator should be doing, or a student or a research scholar should be doing, I see Niharika in her present appearance. So basically, I'm not burdened by my biases, by my expectations, not burdened by both positive and negative biases, is what is meant by realness. Second thing, pricing acceptance and trust. When I, as a person, have realness, and it's again not a very simple thing, but actually very simple to shed off our expectations and biases both, then I'm able to cherish, prize a person in her real self, which means, again, even if she has committed some mistake, even if she has uh, committed something which has gone against me, which has not really benefited me in some way, but since I as a person also understand that there are certain processes which has led her to be what she is, then my acceptance towards this person would also be, again, a process of openness. It will not be a closed acceptance. It will be an open process. And therefore, there will be trust. Next feature of a facilitator or a fully functioning person is empathic understanding. Empathic understanding for both ourselves and for others. Empathic understanding, Rogers described this as, lived experiences, living the experiences of others. And he said that empathic understanding is not merely paraphrasing or reflecting, rephrasing the experiences of others. It's basically ability to be one with your the other person with whom you're communicating, in the sense that you are able to enter the perceptual field of that person. When a person is talking to you, the person is describing certain things to you, each moment of that interaction, I'm open, I'm aware, and I'm non judgmental. It also means that maybe a week ago, when the person told me something else, okay, he is sharing something about the other teacher or his parents. He said, parents did this. When I hear this student this time, I will evoke the memory of having spoken to him the last week, but I will not use those criteria to judge his behavior now. Maybe he's saying contradictory things. Maybe he's saying something which is confirming the same thing. In all the cases, I, as a listener, remain open to the data which is coming. Maybe there is something new. Maybe there is some change. Maybe there is some confirmation also. Fine. But all this processing, when it is devoid of uh, any judgmental imposition, it's called empathic understanding in Rogerian terms. So, with this background and with this theoretical approach, when I was teaching in teacher education colleges, there was this course had a component of uh, preparing teachers um, for a better self-exploration, along with preparing them for the curriculum and the pedagogy and knowledge and other kind of things. So I used to teach this human revolution relationship course, and then there was this practicum along with that, which used to put all the theories that the students read in the practice. In these courses, in this self-development workshop, what we used to do with the students is that they were supposed to um, we would uh, organize certain group activities, and when the students become comfortable, like playing games, simple blindfold games or simple alertness games, after they had played these games, then we start talking to the students about their experiences of what did you feel, how did you reach that conclusion, did you trust your partner, when you were sharing, what did you feel, like that. Through these surface level of activities, gradually, uh, as a facilitator, we used to reach, me and my partner facilitator, we used to reach to a point where the students start talking about their innermost uh, complexes, fears, challenges, struggles. And sometimes it used to take them to some trajectories in their life, which we generally do not talk about in a classroom situation. So, for example, in the classroom, they are generally dealing with the curriculum, pedagogy, and the theories and assignments. But these used to be the spaces where we were not concerned with the curriculum or the syllabus. We were concerned about what is happening with the students, what is going on the mind, what is the awareness level, and this was not to know more about the student. This was to train the student to reflect on her psychological state. And these activities used to be designed actually for this purpose only, where we used to uh, draw the discussions in a way where the students would ultimately reach that point. For example, if I want to talk about violence, okay, in that particular session, each session used to be designed according to certain themes that we had to discuss and bring it to the forefront in the discussion. So suppose there is a theme on violence, then the students would be made to play some game in which they had to just tap somebody, or the activities in which there is some level of discomfort, or although it was a game, after they had played the game, we will start talking about, okay, what did you think about this game? Did you feel hurt? Did you feel that the person is not respecting what condition you are in? Has something like this happened in life? Can you reflect, can you bring in those reflections? um, so it was not as simple that students will start talking about their innermost feelings straight away. Then you take a leap as a facilitator, and you go and say that something like that has happened to me when I was and walking on the road, and what I felt. So as Roger said, that the openness, empathy, realness, when we applies these qualities in a group, in a classroom, it could be a children's class, it could be a university class, what happens is the teacher and the learner, the facilitator and the learner become part of a group. There is no power difference. And when that happens, the teacher learns and grows as much as the students. And I have seen it happening with me. When I started my teaching career at that time, straight up away applying this kind of a transformational, revolutionary approach, where there was also a challenge of establishing yourself, making students listen to you, not having a gray hair, or something to indicate your power or knowledge, authority. In that condition, adopting this kind of an approach where a teacher and the student are on the equal foot, it required great courage. And as Roger says, uh, it is a revolutionary approach. And revolutions are not for timid. So it does have its own outcomes, but it also requires you to risk a lot of your ego and um, fear of not being heard, not being accepted by the student because you are being equal to them. And in the process, what I discovered was that self revelation, self disclosure was revolutionary. It was revolutionary for me. It was revolutionary for the students when they undertook these journeys of the self development sessions. I am not able to see the list of participants, but some of them had texted me that they want to join. If they are here, I want to listen their opinion also. Um, this entire process of uh, reflecting on yourself with a person who is an authority, who is also putting her to that level of journey and probably raising you, or there is a leveling happening. I don't want to say that the teacher comes to the student's level or teacher reaches the student's level. There is no such thing. There is a horizontal shift. It's not a vertical shift. So in this horizontal shift, you require you develop those you know powerful sense of having explored, having resolved, having resorted and discussed, and sometimes even having confessed certain things. I felt scared that day when my father came drunk home. Even to acknowledge such a thing in a classroom of today's day, in a peer group, which is always probably a source of pressure, or a social putting a social face on. In such a peer group, once the students are able to take a step forward where they are disclosing, it becomes such a free flow exercise of uh, listening to each other, accepting each other, and the bond that the students develop from that time onwards is amazing to see. And I have also seen students using those techniques and those reflective mechanisms when they go for teaching, and the kind of reflections that they write or they send back to me is also is also a very powerful exercise. Learning to be real and learning to have empathy transforms the entire situation. So from these experiences, and these are some of the testimonies that the students have written after having gone through this exercise and approach. One student writes, "It was different and little disturbing experience in the beginning. Gradually, I began to understand my fears and complexes. The sessions on communication were really helpful. We never realize how much of vague communication we do and end up in so much confusion and conflict. I think I have learned to see myself and others in entirely different way." Another student's right. Uh, SDW was totally different experience in life. I never thought about myself the way I started doing after these sessions. I remember when we were asked to write about ourselves, I could not write more than a para. But since we were asked to write journals after each session, gradually I started spending more time on myself. I started knowing our classmates better. Everyone has so many struggles. It was disturbing to know, but it helped us strengthen our bonds. So, as you can see that acknowledging our perspectives, acknowledging others' perspective, and it brings a shift. Having said all these positive things, these were not always a rosy picture giving scenario. Sometimes there used to be a lot of conflict. Once a student opens herself, sometimes she has shared something which she has hidden from her family or from herself or from her friends. It used to be a very delicate situation to manage after that. The closure. You open the group and you open the person up, and then after having said that, the person is also coming from not a Rogerian upbringing, right? So she also has her fears, she has her apprehensions that I have shared this, what will happen now? So those kind of confrontations used to happen, and used to require managing on them and working on them gradually over the period of time. Uh, as I said, not all the experiences were very nice, and they were not comforting all the time. Exploration of discords and conflicts sometimes used to generate strong emotional responses, and This accompanies acknowledgement of various emotions and exploring self, which has mediated our action, but we were never aware of it. So yeah, that part is there. Now, what happens with the facilitator? As I said, that facilitator is also part of that learning. This facilitator is able to, I have quoted Rogers here, he says that the person, the facilitator, not the teacher, is the person who is able to live fully in and with each and all of his or her feelings and reactions. Just let me focus on this sentence. It says that the person I described, that I am sitting here, I have these experiences, I have this background experience, maybe something else is going on in my mind, what will I do after this talk? I am a living entity of all these. However, when I have acknowledged that I am not just my intellect, I am a whole human being, my entire process becomes easy. It becomes a free flowing conversion of interactions with the other students. To go further, the person is using all the information nervous system can supply, using it's it in awareness, but recognizing that the total organism may be and is often is wiser than the one's awareness. The person is able to permit the total self to function in all its complexities, in selection from the multitudes of possibilities. The behavior that in this moment of the time will be most generally and genuinely satisfying. So, even if I am a bundle of bombarding neurons and several dimensions of information and data receiving this particular organism, since I'm open to all my experiences from past, present, and future, and I accept myself equally, then I would be able to select the best possible reaction at this time. So a fully functioning person is open to data does not mean that in a Friday lecture, she will start talking about something which is there in future or past. You know, so that discretion and that practicality and the impact is also estimated by a fully functioning person. It's, in short, you can call it wisdom. But that all comes when the person has gone through this process of openness and acceptance. So to conclude, I would just repeat what I have been saying, that a person becomes a better person and becomes uh, capable of interacting with herself and with others better. And this is not just, I mean, as you might have already guessed, that this is not just limited to teaching learning experience. I just took example of teaching learning situation, but this kind of inner journey towards a better life, better relationship, or better professional experiences is possible when we really imbibe this openness, pricing and trust and empathy. So, with that thought, I would just like to end with Roger's quote that people are just as wonderful as sunset if you let them be. When I look at a sunset, I don't find myself saying, soften the orange a bit on the right hand corner. I don't control a sunset. I watch it, I watch with awe as it unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Um, Ma'am, if you could stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now the floor is open for any comments, any discussion or questions that you have. I see Archana Jain raising her hand. Ma'am, I'm unmuting you. You may please proceed with your question or comment. Archana Jain. Please type out your question or please raise your hands for if you have any questions. Mr. Narsimha Murthy has commented something. Sir, would you like to elaborate on this? Yeah.
Like what I meant was like usually anybody like it's expressing is very challenging stuff. Expressing means, they don't want to take any chances. Like it means like it's going to, after expressing, the thing will follow, like all the unpleasant things. That's what I meant by opening can of worms. So like in the talk, I noticed the facilitator, the job or the responsibility of facilitator to make people express, or to make students express themselves. So I just thought, expressing is not easy, and they should have courage, and definitely, teacher or the facilitator, should help expressing, people. So that's what I meant.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'll just try unmuting Archana one more time. Mr. Narayan, we just come to you after Archana's question. Okay. Archana Jain, I'm trying to unmute you, ma'am, if you would like to ask a question. Yeah, please go on.
Hi, sorry, it was by mistake.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Narayan, would you want to continue with your question?
Yeah, thank you, Niharika, and thank you, Shalini ma'am. It was really indeed a great session. My doubt is that when you talk about openness and the positive self-regard and empathetic empathetic understanding, do we see this as a process, as an exercise, or do we see these values as an outcome of the whole self-awareness? Like most of the time, let me put it that way. Like some people say that meditation is the process. Some people say no, meditation is the outcome of how you are. So when we talk about these values to go with in the facilitation, or maybe to imbibe, are we talking as some sort of a skill or exercise, or is it the outcome of something which actually create the concept of the self?
It's both. It's both. I mean, process and the outcome.
To what extent, man?
To the extent.
To what extent? I mean, one can learn these skills, and to what extent, it's just the outcome of who you are really.
No. Who you are is always in Rogerian approach. Who you are is always either good or neutral. All that you want to do away with comes with the social influences which are not in congruence with your true self. Which doesn't mean that there is a standard yardstick Rogers has given to measure a person's character. He says that people are unique and they have different features and characteristics. These characteristics, when allowed to grow in their real self, they develop into creative human beings. But the creativity is suppressed. Now coming back to your question. So when Rogers is asking a person to be open and to real, it's a process because he's asking us to reach those originalities, right? But when I'm offering this originality and realness to somebody who is overwhelmed with the social reality and his growth is dwarfed, or he's struggling with something, or something like a counseling kind of a situation, in that case, that person's openness or realness is an outcome of that session. For me, right now, if I'm talking to you, probably it's a process. But in the beginning, when I adopted this approach in teaching, it was a process to achieve what I achieved later on.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Mr. Narayan, do you have a follow-up question or?
No.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you, sir, for the question. Sita S has a question. I'll just read out the question. If you, ma'am, if you want to add on something to it, please feel free to. So her question is, what is the difference between this type of facilitation and counseling? And it's a thoughtful talk. Thank you.
So, this person-centered approach is basically a person-centered therapy also. Many of the counselors use it as a person-centered therapy. And I gave you an example of how this approach is not just a therapy and how we can use it in the day-to-day life. Your question, your concern is correct. It is also it can also be used in a counseling situation.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I don't see any more questions as of now. So if there are any more questions, please type it out. and or you can raise your hands. I'll easily unmute you. Okay, Rakesh has a question. Rakesh, please go on.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful talk. Now, I want to know that how is different when you teach a child is out from this. They have no judgmental issue and all when they are kids like generally students which are less than 10 years old. And when you come to the college, when judgment and all become very much prominent while you're talking to or making a friends. So how different role the teacher play in that sense, and what do you think that how a teacher can develop a skill when the child will be like away from those kind of value judgment from the primary stage or the student they are below 10 age or not? Is there any process when a teacher can play a role in that sense?
Yes, both teachers and parents can play a role. And this approach, as I said, since it's a very well formulated approach for a therapy also. If you are more interested, you can, read any of the Rogers' original book, doing person-centered therapy and approach of a therapist. In fact, most of his writing are around therapy. But the talk that my today's talk has revolved mostly around a book called Freedom to Learn. In that book, he describes about his discomfort with teaching and how teaching is an overrated job. So your question about how can we address the issue of judgments with the younger children is if we yes, so younger children when they pass a judgment, it has to be understood that it is coming from some ways of being and behaving. When a child sees his parents or teachers passing judgments all the time, he will naturally adopt that ways of behaving. Also, when the child does not receive that openness, that realness, that empathy in his surrounding, most frequently these children grow up to become people who do not accept others. Immediately we as adults immediately reject people. No, so it's very. If you reflect ourselves, we will also find traces of these social influences that we carry still even now. Uh, Even after having read so much of Rogers and having gone through all this, that we also carry these learnings with us of rejection or acceptance and everything. So the only way a child learns to accept, and that's where I can come back to the Narayan's question that see here, achieving a child's openness is an outcome. And for a teacher, it becomes the same thing becomes a means to achieve that outcome. So if a teacher is real and open, accepting, prizing, trusting the student, then a teacher can achieve the student who are prizing, trusting, accepting. And I am more sure and confident about this approach because I have done that with university students, with the age group which is very difficult to address and reach to their psychological level. If it can work at that level, it works at all the levels.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you, Rakesh, for the question. Um, like in today's talk, I noticed that I could really connect when you said that, okay, some of the influences, or like the beginning sentence when you said that, liking a subject is just because the way that the teacher taught you. So teacher may be your parent or a teacher, like male or female. So I have a question because while growing up, I saw some of the students who were brilliant and had a great IQ, but were not performing too well when it came to like particular subjects. And just because they were not, let's say they were not performing well in maths and science, so they were categorized into, oh, not good performing students or average students, but having a great IQ. But growing up with those students till 12th standard, so that also hits your, like that child's ego, or that child's ability to be like confident in himself or herself. So how would you suggest, like what kind of way would you suggest to such students? Like I've seen those students performing very well when they went off to college, like, and got a subject that they wanted to study, and they were performing like better than what their peers were doing in school. So in that situation, what, like as a parent or as a teacher, what should be the approach?
I think Niharika, you've given your answer actually. When you said students are performing better when they get their own subjects to choose.
Yeah.
So the issue is, Rogers compared a growing child with a plant. A
Okay.
plant has its own shape and growth spurt and the direction to grow and ways of grow. A creeper will have a different way, a trunk will have a different way. When you put a different structure, if there is a banyan tree and you put a pipe in, over the tree, over the plant, what you will receive is a thwarted, a crunched plant. It's not because the plant was bad. It's not because the plant didn't have potential. It's because the surrounding of the plant did not allow it to be what it wanted to be.
Mhm.
That's what Rogers says, that if you allow a banyan tree or a creeper to be what they are meant to be, ultimately they will become creative human beings. And of course, they will strive for achievement. But if we do not, then we face all these consequences of psychiatric disorders also. I mean, if it goes on beyond an extreme, then you can face these consequences.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. So, okay, I see one more question by Mr. Narsimha Murthy. Sir, would you like to ask your question? Yeah, please go on, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Yes. Ma'am, like now we are seeing more of this online learning, right? Since maybe past decade or so. And what I understand in your talk is like it's between subject to subject, that means human to human. But now it's more of a object to object, right? Like something else is teaching us, and we are learning from an object like the internet, like online tutorials, lot of them. And what happens to this facilitating role or the role of self, so I'm just I thought maybe my question is a little bit off, but still I thought
Join you in your question. The concern that you have is my concern equally. I was just listening to one of the old talks given by Rogers in 1967. He said in his talk that and he, 67, Rogers' theory started coming in 60. This was a world which was recovering from post World War II. I mean, technology, measurement, control. People needed solutions, technical solutions to everything. And the psychology as a field was dominated by behaviorism and psychoanalysis. So both were deterministic. One was completely mechanical view of humans. The other one was very pessimistic and deterministic view. In this context, Rogers comes and says that, what Freud says, I don't believe in that. And you know what? People have minds and we can study them. We can also design their minds. We can also direct them. He said, and in those days, whenever Rogers used to go to give talks, he used to have like gathering of 400, 500 for a call of 100 people. 5,000, 6,000 for a call of 500 people. And those kind of gatherings. So he jokingly said, you know what? Probably people are not able to believe that people talk to people. We have started talking to machines and we have started looking up to machines for all the solutions. And I was so amused when I heard Rogers saying this in 1967. This could not be true. This could not be more true now. That when we are all the time learning through a machine interface, we are performing our activities through machine interface. This is something which
and
is
also
sustainable. Yeah, it's not a healthy practice. It's not possible to uh, make a fully functioning person through Teams apps.
thank you. And also like we are afraid to talk directly to people nowadays, I think. And like it's better because the machines are non-judgmental, they won't judge us, I think so.
Exactly, exactly. And the reason why you see teens and adults more on these games and machines is because there they get this unconditional acceptance. Humans are not able to provide that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for the question. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Gautam Ghosh has a question. Sir, please proceed with your question.
You have talked about two selves. One is ideal self and another is real self. My question is, as a teacher, would you like to standardize the ideal self or help each student to develop his or his her own ideas of the ideal self? I mean, what is the trade-off? How much will you guide and how much you will let the student develop?
See, the ideal self here is the problem. So I will never support an ideal self. However, it depends what ideal self the student has created. That is also important to know. The source of ideal self generally comes from culture and religious teaching. If that is the case, then it is not very good thing to go for. So one has to understand what is the ideal self of the teacher, of the student, and definitely in any case, what is important is that the child accepts his real self. So I would definitely encourage students to explore and develop their ideal self, real self, rather than going behind their ideal self.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Sir, do you have any follow-up question? I don't think so. Okay. If there are any more questions, you may type it out or please raise your hands. As of now, I don't see any questions. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I would like to thank Dr. Shalini Dixit for an amazing lecture and also for expecting the invitation by our team and being such a good speaker for us. So, and on behalf of Professor Sangeeta Menon, I thank you, and also on behalf of our team. So we'll catch you all in the next evening lecture. So see you all next Friday. Have a great evening. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you everyone for listening to me. Not the
Thank you.
Thank you.